Hello and welcome to Big Nostalgia. I am Phil.
And I'm Vicky.
And this is the podcast / kind of video series where we look at games from our childhood, from years and years ago. We look at how they were developed, kind of their audio visual qualities, their quirks, their plot, their characters. And then we look at their legacy. And by legacy, I don't just mean how the kind of popular culture views them and how they've been remembered. I also look at legacy as in, like, do they hold up today compared to when we first played them as kids? This is a very exciting episode because this is our first time going beyond the N64 era. And I think we kind of agonised over this a bit because it's like, at what stage does, like, nostalgia... Where is the nostalgia line, you know? How long ago does something need to have come out for us to be nostalgic about it? But I think these games that we're covering this season, we're nostalgic about, at least on some degree.
Oh, yes. I mean, we're going to be focused more on Wii games.
And Gamecube games.
And Gamecube games. I mean, we didn't have a Gamecube ourselves that we really used.
No.
So it is more based on the Wii versions. But because, of course, since then you've had the Wii U and, of course, the Switch, there's been enough time that it still feels reasonably nostalgic. Definitely when you think of all those Wii games, it's given us a chance to look through our game collection and actually, oh my goodness, I haven't played this game in ages. Oh my goodness, I can't believe this game came out so long ago. Because it feels like some of these games feel like yesterday. And to be fair, some of these games are yesterday because a lot of replay value. But actually when they first came out was enough time ago that it felt you still could do the title of nostalgia.
Yeah, and I think, like you say, this first game is almost perfect for showing what we'll be covering because it was released on both the GameCube and the Wii, so it ticks both boxes at once. Do you want to fill us in? What game we'll be talking about for our first episode back?
Well, for our first episode, we are going to be looking at Twilight Princess, which is a very soft spot for both me and Phil, as we are big Zelda gamers. God, I love the Zelda franchise. So I'm not going to lie, I'm very excited to be doing this for our very first one back. So let's get into it. Twilight Princess was actually the 13th installment of the Zelda franchise. It first came out on the GameCube and the Wii in December the 19th, 2006. And for the Wii, December the 8th, 2006. It was released as a GameCube last game on their console. And of course, for the Wii, it was their release game for the console. So it was kind of like that sweet spot. And I think it's really good because originally they were supposed to be releasing the game like a year or so, a year before.
Yeah.
They decided to hold off so they could release it on both the consoles. Now, I'll get into gameplay and reasons behind that later, but I do think it was good that they did hold off for a bit just so they could have this game on both the consoles. And I have heard rumours of it coming to the Switch, which would be very interesting down the line.
I think every single like week there is a rumour that a past Zelda game is coming to the Switch.
It's Zelda, and I'd love to play the Twilight Princess on the Switch, but you know.
The Twitch.
The Twitch.
Stream it as well. Because I remember when the Mario 3D All-Stars collection got announced. There was all those people like, they're going to release Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker, and Twilight Princess all as one package, like they did for 64 Sunshine and Galaxy. And they didn't. It
would be cool.
It would be cool.
I'm really glad they didn't do Ocarina of Time, because let's be honest, Ocarina of Time has had, I love that game to pieces, don't get me wrong, but it's had on the 3DS, it's been released quite a bit, and of course now it's been released on the Nintendo 64. The
Nintendo Switch Online,
which is awesome, but it does feel like that one's kind of like their go-to game, which is an awesome go-to game, but it'd be nice to have a bit more of the Zelda franchise on modern technology to play. But yes, originally released on the GameCube 2005, but delayed to refine the game content and the port to the Wii. They had a bit of difficulty with that, but they got all sorted out. So, Obviously, the developer of the Twilight game was Nintendo. Producer was Shigeru Miyamoto. But they also had a director who was... Aonuma, yes. The director was Aonuma. So they've got a really good team sorting this out. The actual storyline of Link turning into a wolf, Aonuma had a dream that in his dream, he got changed into a wolf. And that was why he brought it into the office. They were trying to think of a way to get Link between the dark world, the world of the light. And, of course, in quite a few Zelda games, there's like another world, a darker world, a shadow world, the opposite for the Triforce. And that was where the main idea came from. A nice dream. Ah. Good thing he didn't dream about, turning up to work without any clothes on, eh?
Going to give that big present. Well, maybe he did when he was developing Breath of the Wild, because you can kind of like just walk around that in your boxer shorts.
Well, you say that. Twilight Princess was one of the first Zelda games to show Link with his top off. Because in the sumo wrestling bit, with the Gorons, he is topless in his sumo wrestling gear. And of course, the next one being Breath of the Wild.
You didn't seem to have to look at your notes for that. Did you just have that fact off the top of your head?
I remembered it. I thought it was funny.
Just on your keyboard, Link, topless.
So, we've done a bit of the general setup and who was in charge. If we go a bit more into the story. So, story of Twilight Princess is Link is dragged into basically the shadow, the
Twilight Realm.
Dragged into the Twilight Realm. I was talking about too many Zeldas and I got confused. He got dragged into the Twilight Realm, transforms into a wolf, and has to help the character Midna basically reclaim the Twilight Realm to the Twilight people. You've got this big bad Zant. But, of course, everyone knows that, a bit like Mario and Bowser, Link's main enemy is dear old Ganondorf. Ganondorf has to be there somewhere. What did we think of the reveal that, it was Ganondorf behind Zant all along?
I think I was a bit, I honestly think, and I was a bit disappointed.
It was nice that it wasn't Ganondorf for once. It was nice. I found him a lot creepier before Ganondorf turned up.
Yeah, and whilst I think a lot of the lore is cool, and I've not been reading the manga, but I've seen some of the panels from some of the more latest ones, which covers Ganondorf and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But so some of the lore and stuff, especially because that was only, I think that was just before Hyrule Historia came out and did the whole Zelda timeline thing. But I was also we had this really menacing villain the whole way through, and then he basically just gets overrun.
Yeah, it's a bit kind of half, and it's quite far along in the game as well to have a great reveal.
Yeah.
And then Zant just turns. I remember the scene where Zant finds them in the waterbed temple.
I was just thinking about that.
And he's there, and his little masky bit comes out, and all you can see is his mouth, and it's all slimy and just gross and really quite threatening. Then you skip forward a bit, and you've got him stamping up his feet up and down, and basically throwing a child's paddy. So it's a bit...
Yeah, and also that whole thing with the water spirit is just really badass.
Really
obviously it comes out to
Midna?
attack him, and he basically uses it to attack Midna, and then basically is well, later losers, I'm off.
Well, as we're talking about Midna, of course, when we first meet her, she's this little imp. We have no backstory. She just kind of wants to use Link in his wolf form to sort out whatever her overall goal is. And of course, we really get to build with the character along. She is such a good second for Link. I mean, all the famous seconds for Links. I mean, you've got Ocarina of Time, you've got Navi, Skyward Sword, you've got Fi, the soul of the Master Sword.
Yeah.
I've got to admit, Midna is one of my favourite sidekick of
companions.
Sidekick didn't sound right. Companion.
It's closer to like the Doctor Who model than it is like a sidekick.
Yeah, rather than the superhero sort of model. And Midna is such a badass character. I mean, initially, she's just kind of like, oh, you're a wolf, and like making fun of you, and you have to work out all on your own. And by the end of it, she has built so much as a character throughout one game. It's just, and her relationship with Zelda, her relationship with basically the world of light, it's very interesting. And that bit we were saying about when Zant does that to the spirit and how it affects her, I think that is such a big arc in the storyline for Midna as a character, because it basically nearly kills her. So
yeah.
So I just thought she was... Did you know as well, Midna's voice is actually scrambled English phrases said by a Japanese voice actress, Akiko Komoto? So the mixture of the accent with the language and then scrambled was supposed to give it sort of an outer worldly sort of, and I think it's quite well done, to be fair. So on the way we do quite traditional Zelda things. You go to temples, you meet amazing characters. But what I thought was quite nice, and what they did to help with the gameplay, is at the very beginning, you're not just thrown into the world of Twilight. You're given a chance to settle in your Oron village and meet the children and get a hand around the controls. Now, I've only played the Wii control version, but it was quite handy having your standard sort of exploratory and like with the goats and stuff like that, just to get the hands of the riding and the gameplay when it came to the new controls of the Wii. So I thought that was very well done, and that's what they wanted to kind of put across.
Yeah, although, would you say that the intro to Twilight Princess is too long?
Yes, but I felt it had to be that long because of all the backstory with the children. And that set up a lot of things for the storyline, because it's not just when Link is running after them, it wasn't just looking for the next step. They were the reason he even stepped into the Twilight Realm, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was originally to find the children and help get his village back to normal. And I think a lot of things would have been lost. But there was that whole... I forgot about that. There's a whole
monkey
bit in the forest. Yeah. No,
So,
that bit is way too long. I thought it was just a village. No, it's the monkey bit as well. No, that's too long.
No, I was thinking the same. I was like, you go out, you do like, you herd some goats or whatever, and then the children run off and you run after them and then you're in the Twilight. And I was like, no, there's an entire like half-hour segment where you've got the wooden sword and you have to go into the forest.
And don't you have to shine the lamp?
I think you get I think you might get the lamp that early. So I've been watching someone play, but they've been playing the a beta of the new. Basically, they've made a Twilight Princess randomizer.
Oh, okay.
But
That's
in order for that to work, though, that you have to basically start in a world post Twilight. Like the world you're in, there's none of it is under Twilight, basically, because otherwise it doesn't work. So you kind of skip those bits of the plot. But yeah, either way, I think you do get the lamp because you have to go through the dark tunnel, don't you? And you have to burn away the spider webs. Yeah.
And I remember you have to kind of like follow the monkey.
So that's when you come back, because when you come back, it's all it's got the purple fog.
That's it. But yeah, you do get the lamp, as you said, because of the spider webs. No, if it was just the village, it would be fine, and that's how I remembered it. But with all that extra stuff, you didn't need all of that.
Yeah.
So we've talked a bit about the game and a little bit about the characters. Is there a favourite character? Of course, I've only mentioned really the main two, if you don't count Ganondorf. Is there any characters that you're really happy that came back? Are there any characters that you think make this a really good game? Or, I mean, they always fill the world really well in all Zelda games. And I think even like from a random little boy playing in the village to like, Zelda, Princess of Hyrule, they always give a nice little backstory to everyone. So that baby was creepy.
I was thinking of the baby.
The baby. Creepy ass baby.
This baby capitalist.
Yeah.
Do you think he was the inspiration for the film Boss Baby?
That would be a really cool fact. But I did not find that. It is not written in my notes, I'm afraid. But that would be so cool. Like, cool, yet slightly disappointing. So, it's,
Yeah. There is a lot of characters. Like, there is a clown whose whole thing is he just mans a cannon that fires people. And that's just
he
it's
is.
just like a method of travel.
Why not?
That's the thing, is like, a lot of this, the whole, like, I put realism in kind of quotes, because obviously it just looks kind of more real for a Zelda game. It still has its own defined art style. But obviously that was like the backlash to Wind Waker being like too kiddie, like, whatever. But it's funny that they still have like very colourful, eccentric characters even within that, because like everyone's like, oh yeah, Twilight Princess is like the dark Zelda game. It's like the edgy Zelda game, and it's like, okay, but there's still
a guy who shoots people out of cannons.
Yeah. There's like a creepy baby who goes around just buying shops.
You think, where are your parents?
And then when he buys the shop in Castletown, everyone is forced to dance.
Yeah, just forced dance. Is that all the time, or when a certain amount is spent?
When you donate enough to get that shop in the city centre, I'm pretty sure, well, the Castletown centre bit, I'm pretty sure they're just like doing like
dances all the time.
Yeah, it's a real upbeat music, isn't it? It's like the da 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 da. Do you remember?
Disturbing. Yes, I do remember. And disturbing. I'm definitely going with disturbing. Well, it's funny that you mention, of course, about Wind Waker, because Twilight Princess starts its life. The whole original concept of Twilight Princess was called Wind Waker 2, because Wind Waker was such a popular game on the Gamecube, and they were in the process of making it into the next...
Like a Majora's Mask, but for Wind Waker.
Yeah, but the problem they had was, like you said, the cartoony look of Wind Waker was a hit and a miss with quite a lot of the fans. Personally, I thought it was a lovely way of doing the art style, and I thought it was very unique, but a lot of people thought it was quite childish and didn't really portray the Zelda environment. So that's when they started going down, and this one was supposed to be more mature feel, including like the monsters. They were all supposed to be more grown-up version of all the monsters that were in the Zelda franchise. It was all supposed to be like a development. It was all supposed to be more realistic, and that was supposed to be a lot more gritty.
But they still couldn't resist firing you out of a cannon.
They really couldn't. I mean, one way of they did that was motion capture to bring the characters more alive was used. And, of course, the return of the day-night cycle. But this also include weather and wind as an extra sort of elements. And I feel that was a good stepping stone when it came to Breath of the Wild, which, of course, they took that to a whole new level. But they still had Twilight Princess was like that sort of stepping stone, which was really good. When it came out as a teaser trailer at E3 in 2004, all the reviews were positive. Everyone was really excited to see what this was going to bring to the Zelda franchise, and everyone was really digging the new, more mature look, so that's what they kind of went with. But they did use the Wind Waker engine for the GameCube version, as they already had that in place. They just, of course, changed the look.
Yeah, and you can kind of tell, like, in places...
In places, yeah.
Specifically, and it sounds like a real weird one, but like when you boot up the game, like the file select screen is very, very similar. They've just obviously given it a complete overhaul. I don't know why that's the bit of the game where I'm like, this feels like the Wind Waker. But still, yeah.
But so when they were making it, because of course they were making it for two consoles, the GameCube version was basically a Wind Waker engine, but of course for the Wii version it was also made in that sort of style, so a lot of things fell short to the Wii's capabilities due to that, and with the HD version a lot of those things were updated to actually fit the console that the game was made for, because they were making basically two versions of the game on different consoles, I think it was a lot of time restraint for them.
Yeah.
The main difference between the GameCube and the Wii version is that when developing it, they basically mirror imaged the game version and the Wii version. And that was mainly because the main guy on it, he wanted, when you're doing the motion controls with the Wii, he wanted it to feel a bit more natural, because most people are right-handed. So to make it easier for the development and to make it easier just generally in gameplay, they literally mirrored it all on for the Wii version.
I think, and that's quite like a big thing to do as well. Like, rather than just, I guess, flip Link, they're like, we're going to flip the entire
world. The world.
So, and I don't think, oh, you probably have it written down, but like they didn't bother flipping a lot of the graphics and textures. So I think a lot of the Hylian text is written backwards, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. It was just easier for them to... But if you look at any maps, like Fan Match, it will show the game version, GameCube version, rather than the Wii version, because that was, of course, the original version that was supposed to go out. That was one of the things that they changed during that year of extra development. Yeah,
I remember it was not long before the actual HD version came out, but it's like the only Zelda game I've done a full Let's Play of, and it was Twilight Princess. But you do the GameCube version. I'd only ever played the Wii version. So there kept on being moments of, I know the way, and then, wait, this isn't this direction.
I've got to admit, I've only ever played the Wii version, but I think I'd feel exactly the same. You just get a bit lost.
But one thing about the development of the game that I always remember is the fact, and I think you can see this on the actual box, it must have been quite late in development they took it out, was the fact that originally at some point, Twilight Princess was going to have a magic meter, like Ocarina of... all the games up until that point had it. I think Link to the Past had it, Ocarina of Time had it, Majora's Mask had it. Wind Waker's was a bit more of a magic/stamina bar, because didn't it dictate how long you could fly using the leaf?
It did, and yeah, that was quite play heavy, wasn't it? Whereas the magic meter, say in Ocarina of Time, it didn't affect your gameplay. It just kind of gave you additional abilities in a fight. It kind of gave you a bit more to work with. But I suppose in Ocarina of Time, I didn't actually use... there was those portal ones. There were those big magic connector bits, wasn't there?
Oh, what, are you talking about, Din's Fire?
Yeah. I didn't use those as much, but anyway, I suppose we're not talking about magic, are we?
It was Furor's Wind that was the transport one, if you wanted to leave a dungeon. Din's Fire was useful. That one was just the one that made the big sphere of fire around you.
Mm. And what was the last one?
That was Neru's Love, which, to be fair, I didn't... It's kind of like what... In Twilight Princess, instead, you've got the magic armor. Yeah. It was Ocarina of Time's version of that. You had protection as long as you had magic. But I don't think it's ever really seen much use. It was kind of just the third one. And also I think you get it quite late.
Because there's 3 goddesses, it kind of has to be there, sort of thing.
I can't remember which fairy fountain it's at, but I don't really remember us picking it up much as kids. Anyway, this isn't an Ocarina of Time episode.
Anyway, and this isn't a Magic Meter episode. It's the fact that Twilight Princess didn't have one, which I suppose, if you look at the history as you just did of all the games before, it was weird. But I don't think the game is lacking by not having a Magic Meter.
Yeah, it's interesting to think as to what may have used the Magic Meter unless they kind of had it connected. Because, the one thing that comes to mind is how the Lens of Truth used the Magic Meter, and that was a different way of viewing. So whether Wolf Sense would have used magic, but then that doesn't really make sense.
Or when he does that spin attack, maybe you could have charged it a bit more with the magic.
Yeah.
But maybe that's why they removed it, because it wasn't needed in gameplay.
There's no elemental arrows in this game compared to, the 3D Zeldas before it. There's no fire, ice, or light arrows.
Well, you get light arrows, but oh no,
Zelda
uses light arrows at the very end, so you never actually get them yourself.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. It's just something that I suppose I've never really noticed in gameplay, and maybe that's why they removed it, because it just wasn't needed. I'm glad that they didn't just add it because they didn't have a reason for it. And as you said, if it was on the box art, it was still late in the game when they removed it. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting one.
Yeah. Well, I think I remember it was also on the box, but it's been a long time. I don't think I've got the box here, so I can't check.
So when we talk about the game, of course, we also like to talk about the soundtrack of the game. What do you think of the soundtrack of Twilight Princess? Would you say that is a particularly memorable one, or can you come up with any of the songs or the tunes in your head? I mean, you just did the Baby Shop one.
Yeah, so it's one of those ones where, and this is where like soundtracks actually were getting to be like, hours rather than, because like as much like they had more room for more tracks and stuff like that. But I think the ones that like stick in my head is I still remember like Ordon Village, like the beginning of the game. Kakariko Village is just a very slowed down version of kind of Kakariko Village. Mostly keeps the same theme throughout all the games, just a different kind of rendition. Yeah, I think it's got a very memorable soundtrack. Like Midna's Lament is obviously the one that everyone always remembers, which is the piano music when you are taking a Tyrell Castle after the Water Temple.
The music in Twilight Princess is all synthetic sound. None of it is orchestra, which was a big complaint of the overall game when it originally came out, because quite a lot of the Zelda games are known for having the fallback orchestra. Now, originally, the director wanted to do a fallback orchestra, and evidence of this can be found in some of the teaser trailers, because he had the main theme done by an orchestra, but I believe it was down to either time restraint or choices. There's certain sounds they weren't able to emulate through an orchestra, but they could through the computer. So that's why they decided to go more down a computer route. But it was one of the critiques of the game that it didn't sound as well as it could do.
Yeah, well, it's some of the, I guess maybe some like the Twilight music, because that's got a lot more almost like beeps and like distortions to it, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. And I suppose it helps make the Twilight Realm feel a bit more outer-worldly as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the soundtrack, personally, I find it quite an enjoyable soundtrack, but I gotta admit, I've had a little listen to a couple of orchestra versions of the soundtrack, and I always prefer a bit of orchestra over synthetic sound any day. I just think it sounds a bit more.
Yeah.
More than synthetic can emulate, really.
Yeah. No, I do see why that would be like people's complaints about it, but I think it's a solid soundtrack. Like, it's one of those ones where I can, like, there are like mixes you can find on YouTube which is just like Twilight Princess music to work to.
Yeah.
And it's just like a collection of all like the most chill tracks from it, and you can just have it like ticking away in the background. Like, I definitely think it was like a decent one.
Yeah. But then again, I can't think of... That would be an interesting a list to make up your favourite soundtracks from all the Zelda franchise. Because I suppose that, as you said, certain songs are going to show up in all of them. But it'd be nice to know what overall is your favourite or not your favourite. Did you know that it also got released on the Nivedad Shield TV in December the 5th, 2017? But you might not have... Is that how it's pronounced?
NVIDIA, yeah.
But it starts with an N.
Yeah, NVIDIA.
NVIDIA. Oh, okay. NVIDIA. But of course, that was only released in China.
Yes.
So,
I mean, that's because China have weird, like, rules about video games and stuff, like... So, there was... they always have to get released under, like, different platforms or, like, different rules, and there's been all these, like, knockoff, like, basically Chinese versions of consoles that have been released in other regions just so that games can get in there full stop. But that's starting to wear off.
But it was very interesting that Twilight Princess got released on the NVIDIA because it's one of the first Nintendo-developed console games released on a non-Nintendo console.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Because, of course, Nintendo do like to keep things quite close to their chest.
Yeah.
And of course, then they had the Wii U high definition remastered version in March 2016, which is they've did a lot of changes between the first original one to the remastered one, which I'll go into a bit more during development. But it was something that they really wanted to do just to give a bit more definition and a bit more look to the game. And I think they've done a really good job, to be fair. Of course, the Wii U HD version included enhanced graphics, but also included Amiibos. So if you got the Wolf Link amiibo, it opens the Cave of Shadows, which is the only way to get that specific gameplay, which was a nice little extra if you had that version. Of course, other Zelda amiibos worked. For example, Link or Toon Link would replenish all your arrows, and Zelda or Sheik would restore all your health. And then Ganondorf, if you got his amiibo and used it, would actually give you ×2 damage, so it'd make the game harder, which was a nice way of integrating the amiibos. Certainly when you think amiibos were still kind of, I'd like to think they're still like early development stage at that point.
They were, yeah, it's still
they
like...
They weren't as developed as they were now on the Switch.
Well, it's still like that initial peak of popularity they had as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah, when they first came out, they were very much... quite a niche sort of thing, whereas now there's so many different amiibos. I'm not saying they're still not a niche, but it feels like only Nintendo pure games actually bothered to even include amiibos.
Yeah, there's like a handful of others. There's like Monster Hunter has amiibos now. Obviously the big like third party one was like at the time Shovel Knight, when that got its own amiibo, because everyone thought that meant Shovel Knight was going to be added to Smash.
Oh dear, everyone hoped, eh?
Yeah. But yeah, it is mostly just like, I think the flow of them slowed right down as well. Like at like its peak, it was like every Smash character was getting one, and they were coming out like every few weeks. It felt like.
So now I want to talk about the more technical issues that they had with the Twilight Princess game. For example, when following the discovery of a buffer overflow vulnerability in the Wii version of Twilight Princess, an exploit known as the Twilight Hack was developed, allowing the execution of custom codes from a secure digital card on the console. Specifically designed save file would cause the game to load unsigned code, which could include executable and linkable format programs and homebrew Wii applications. Versions 3.3 and 3.4 of the Wii menu prevented copying exploit save files onto the console until circumvention methods were discovered, and versions 4.0 of the Wii menu patched this vulnerability. But it's nice, it's always good to find people being able to do hacks and stuff like that, because there was stuff in the Ocarina of Time, wasn't there, that if you jumped a certain way, you could get through the game quicker for speedrunners.
Yeah, although this is different because this is about like essentially running like different software and things like that as a way of running like homebrew games or whatever. Like there was a game on the 3DS which I think got exclusively sold because it sold really well because it had that exploit in it, and it took ages for Nintendo to find it. So people would buy the game just to do that exploit so that they could run homebrew stuff on their 3DS. It's one of those things which is a bit different. Do you have in your notes about how it's possible to softlock yourself? As in, make a version of Twilight Princess unbeatable?
Unbeatable.
As in, like, if you do this, you literally cannot complete the game.
Oh, one of those. No, I didn't find any of those in my research, because there's been problems with that randomizer, hasn't there?
Well, yeah, randomizers can run into that problem if they're not properly, like, programmed as that. The arrows, the burn arrow is behind like a door which requires a burn arrow to open, therefore you can't complete the game.
You can't complete it, yeah.
But this is, and I think I'm not sure if they would have found some way to remove it in the Wii U version, but I noticed certainly in the Gamecube and Wii versions, it's after the first temple, it's after you beat the Twilight, and you go across the bridge I think it's towards Kakariko, and then the bridge gets stolen behind you. Mm-hmm. If you save and quit then without going through to the next area, when you restart the game, it puts you back at the beginning of that area, the wrong side of the bridge, and the bridge is still gone.
Oh.
So then you can't continue through to Kakariko, and then there is literally no way to do it. You would have to start the whole game again.
How frustrating.
But it's such a rare one because it's mid-travel that happens. And the bridge is only stolen once you blow up the rock that's blocking your way, because that way you've got a through path. So I'm sure people when they're playing are like, well, let's just get to the next area kind of thing. But
yeah,
it is
not many people. But you know that someone got absolutely, let down by that. Coming back and being like,
Jimmy, come help your mum bring the shopping in.
but Mum, Jimmy now. And just, she'd have no idea. No idea. Jimmy would complain for days.
Ruined his save file.
Poor Jimmy. Now, of course, whenever we do a video like this, we always like to find quirky and interesting facts. So, of course, this game was the launch title in the US for the Wii alongside Wii Sport. Most of the developers on it said they were inspired by Lord of the Rings for the look of the game, which I can understand with some of the goblins, the way that they are and the way that they dress and stuff like that. Because, of course, when they were in development of this, Lord of the Rings, the 3 films, were coming out around that time. So the development said that they had a lot of inspiration for the aesthetics from that. Wolf Link, his howls, the songs are taken from Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and Wind Waker, except for his final howl song, which is the title page of the field menu theme of Twilight Princess.
Huh.
Which I think is a nice, subtle sort of little nod to its predecessors.
Yeah, because I think you get Zelda's Lullaby as one of them. You got the Song of Healing from Majora's Mask. I can't remember the other ones. But yeah, it was always nice to hear like the common themes being used.
Definitely if you consider, of course, who the sword fighter is who helps support you, who he's supposed to represent.
Yeah.
So it was a nice little nod for that.
And the sword techniques were kind of like, again, it was building off what they'd done in Wind Waker, which had a few of them. But I thought some of those were really cool. Like the one where it was the shield bash and then you jump over their heads for like a strike. It made the combat made the combat a bit more like sophisticated.
I've got to admit, playing that game from a Gamecube perspective, I wouldn't mind playing the Gamecube version at some point, but it'd definitely be a lot different because I've gotten used to, of course, the Wii control versions of it, and I felt that the way they did definitely like the slash over the head and stuff, they did it very well with the motion controls. And they didn't go so OTT, of course, with dear old Skyward Sword with the more motion control before it became the Wii U, which didn't really work.
Yeah.
As well. So, well, personally. But, you never know, that might be a video in the future. Right now, we're talking about Twilight Princess.
And actually, there is one more criticism I have for Twilight Princess before we move on. And that is the lack of Sun Song in this game. And that's quite like a niche thing. To do like an any percent run, like just to beat the game, I don't think it really matters. But there's just certain things, especially looking for Poe souls, where Poes are like sculptures and that some of them are more out at night. So without having a Sun Song to actually trigger that change from day to night, some areas I think are like Ocarina of Time where time doesn't progress. So you just kind of have to find somewhere where time moves and just wait. And it's just, I think that might be one of the things that really harms the replayability. The reason it came to mind is because in the Randomizer, which I've mentioned previously, there is a command for when you speak to Midna. They've basically added this as an added feature, but basically if you hold down like one of the triggers when you speak to Midna, it will go from day to night. Mm-hmm. So they've basically implemented a fake Sun Song into the Randomizer because you have all the Poe souls in the pool of items. It would make the Randomizer really, really infuriating. Imagine if, like, having to just wait around till night time to kill the Poe that's got the bow and arrow.
So I also feel that it would have helped, like, the collection of bugs as well, because there's only certain areas and certain times of day that you can find bugs, isn't there?
Yes. Yeah. So you've got, like, the day set and the night set.
Yeah, so that would have helped. But how would you have seen that being implemented? Because I suppose, in comparison, there was no musical instrument really in this one. I mean, you have the reed that calls Eponia, but the wolf would howl, but there was no actual musical instrument of any sort. So potentially a reed that was in the shape of a sun. I don't know.
Yeah, or you could do what a lot of the modern kind of adventure games do, which is, even if you just had it so you could only do it as Wolf Link for some daft reason, you could just have a wait mechanic and just have maybe the Wolf Link just sit down and start like slowly wagging his tail. Like, just to have it so...
I see.
Literally...
Just to, like, fasten up time sort of thing.
So he just sits down and then maybe does, like, a fade to black, fade back in, and it's nighttime. And basically, all it's implied is that you've waited, but you haven't had to actually wait.
Okay.
Just something like that. It doesn't need to be necessarily...
a big deal, or, like, a really over-the-top, or
yeah.
magical... Yeah.
But yeah, that's one of the things where... I think that's only in recent years, and like I think it only really bother you if you're trying to go for 100%. But definitely something I was like,
Played on your mind.
Yeah, it just makes it a bit more annoying, you know.
Well, Twilight Princess was quite good for starting certain trends, which I think I felt moving on to, of course, Breath of the Wild being their next development big game. For example,
After Skyward Sword.
After Skyward Sword. Twilight Princess was the first to be released on 2 consoles until Breath of the Wild, when, of course, the first release date... Of course, Skyward Sword and Wind Waker have all been developed on 2 consoles now, but I'm talking about when they first got released.
Yeah.
Also, I did write it down. I found it here about the topless thing in Breath of the Wild, just saying. Iron boots, of course, in Twilight Princess were used as an item rather than an upgradable ability like in Ocarina of Time, which is, and of course some of the later Ocarina of Times you can get things that make it more of an item rather than an upgrade, which I think is slightly better when it comes to the iron boots.
Yep.
This game, so far, including Breath of the Wild, is the only Zelda game not to include Octorok enemies.
Okay.
Out of all the Zelda games, every single Zelda game has one, apart from Twilight Princess, for some reason. Don't know. Just wasn't their day.
Yeah, I guess so.
The Wii version, when it first came out, had more glitches, as in you could skip the Cave of Ordeals if you put out the torches on each floor.
Okay. Interesting.
So you could just get through it nice and easy, really. It had quite a few high pieces of hearts. It had more hearts than any other Zelda game. It had 45 pieces of hearts in that game. But it's the only Zelda game that requires you to have 5 pieces of hearts so you can make a heart container.
Yeah.
So that's why the more higher amount of pieces of heart than most other Zelda games. So we get into the point of our little video where I enjoy it very muchly. We've gone on to the acclaim of the game and how well it's been taken by fans and, awards it might have won. So Twilight Princess was released to critical acclaim and commercial success. It received perfect scores from major publications such as 1UP.com, Computer and Video Games, Electronic Gaming Monthly, Game Informer, Games Radar, and GameSpy. On Metacritic, Twilight Princess holds a score of 95 out of 100 for the Wii version and 96 out of 100 for the Gamecube version, indicating universal acclaim. It's the highest rated game of 2006 on Metacritic. Game trailers in the reviews called it one of the greatest games ever created, which is always good. I mean,
it's pretty positive.
It is pretty positive. I mean, looking for all this research, the main critique I found was the soundtrack. Everyone seemed to have an issue with the fact that it was synthetic sound, but most of it was all positive, which is really good to see. And I've got to admit, I always really enjoyed the game. I thought it was the only thing I personally thought a little bit was that it was quite it reminded me of Ocarina of Time, but I think that was more me overplaying Ocarina of Time, and I just know the Zelda franchise of Ocarina of Time so well. It followed some similar tracks, and of course a lot of games did the whole hero to wolf transformation.
Yeah.
I mean, Sonic did it with Sonic Unleashed. So potentially it was just the time that it came out that there was quite a few games like that.
Yeah.
It was a different way for them to try and take it.
Yeah, and I think it's like one of those, it's very much like Ocarina on a surface level, but like there's certain changes that are like quite different. Like outside of, I think, the Forest Temple and the Water Temple, all the rest of like the in quote temples are like not, they're like different areas. Like you got the Goron Mines, the Arbiter's Grounds, Then, I suppose you got the Temple of Time as well. Then the City in the Sky. Like, that's all, like, quite different and novel.
Yeah.
I think it was one of those things where compared to Wind Waker, which kind of continued this trend of trying new things, it did feel like it was going
Still
back
new.
to convention. Well, it felt like it was going back to convention more than Wind Waker.
But still new in the sense of the areas that it was trying to explore. And the bit that we mentioned earlier in the water scene, when that happened to Midna, that just kind of like, you had a game table and just flipped the table, didn't it? I was not expecting that at all. And the whole, like, story of the mirror. So, yeah, it did have, as you said, it was more conventional than Wind Waker, or back to conventional than Wind Waker, but still was original premise, which is good. The only other major critique that I could find was there was a lot of critique about the easy bosses. Now, the bosses in the Twilight Zelda game, I thought were all right. There was some I found easier than others, but apparently as an overall game compared to other Zelda games, generally the Zelda bosses were a lot easier. So I've got them down here, and I thought we could have a little look, because I didn't remember all of these when I first looked through. So, of course, you've got the swamp plant.
Piranha plant thing.
Yeah, which is called Diababa.
Right.
You've got the fire Goron.
Yep.
Then you've got the eel, the really big fish eel with the eye on the back of its head.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the bone monster.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The frozen yeti.
Yep.
The giant spider.
Yes.
The dragon in the sky world.
Yep.
And then, of course, you've got Zant, Evil Zelda, and then Ganon with his 3 stages. Now, I forgot that giant spider was even a big bad boss. I forgot that. I didn't particularly find that was a really big or particularly bad boss. But all the others all sounded pretty traditionally Zelda to me.
They were all very novel in the way that you defeated them as well.
Yeah, of course, they relied highly on the latest item that you found, but that is just traditionally Zelda sort of esque. But none of them were, as you said, repetitive sort of killing style. I mean, the swamp plant, they had certain stages and you relied on the monkey. The fire Goron with the chains and using the metal boots and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, I found that they all used their items very well.
Yeah, I mean, some of them, I think it's a very cool boss. It's a bit, like, weird, though, when you think of, like, the floating skull, you have to use, the spinner, and you have to raise up and just basically smack it in the face of the spinner.
Yeah.
And then the spider one, or it's like, you just take, it's been a while since I've played that particular boss, but don't you just control giant stone hands and just basically slam it?
Yes.
Because you're using the rod.
Yeah, which is all well and good, because that's in the Temple of Time, isn't it?
Yes.
So it's all well and good, but it's still nothing really to write home about compared to all the other ones. What did you think of the 3 stages of Ganon?
So the first one is, are we saying the first one's Puppet Zelda, or not?
Oh, that'd be 4.
Yeah.
I mean, we can include Puppet Zelda if you get live. We've got Evil Zelda, then of course you've got Beast, Horse and Sword.
Yeah. So
if we start with Puppet Zelda.
So first off, I'll say that I think possibly that my favourite boss battle is actually Zant.
Oh, okay.
Because Zant is the remix of all the ones you faced so far.
Yeah, and he's
you have to remember how you kind of beat those ones. But then, yeah, you got it's like the Puppet Zelda, and then I thought it was cool, like, the Beast versus Beast kind of... I mean, you can do Beast Ganon as human, but I think the game kind of intends for you to do it like Wolf versus, like, Beast Ganon. And then I felt the horseback bit was it was good, but it was also a bit annoying because obviously Zelda, you have to wait for Zelda to fire the light arrows, and at times she can just be there like prepping the bow for like ages, and you're like, I've got a clean shot, shoot him!
Just shoot him already!
And then it's pretty classic, I think, Zelda to have like a proper as in I say it's pretty classic, like it was similar to the final bit of Wind Waker to be like a full on just sword versus sword with Ganon.
Yeah, but I don't mind that too much because it's nice to get down to the nitty gritty. And I suppose like the Ganon Beast form, I mean, we all know him from the very traditional Zelda games in his pig form. And it felt like it'd been a while since he'd been decrypted or shown in his piggy form for a while. So I think it was like a nice little nod to more of the classic Zelda games.
Yeah.
And I did like Evil Zelda. That was a nice little twist. Definitely after she kind of disappears after helping Midna, it was a nice little kind of, what happened to Zelda?
Yeah, so almost a little bit of like, did she just die?
What happened here? But, yeah. Of course, something that is very near and dear to my heart, there is an amazing illustrator called Akira Haimkwa. I'm very sorry for all my mispronunciations.
As with both the previous
fan.
seasons, we've not gotten any better at pronouncing any of these names, so we do apologise.
Nope. But she was creator of the manga based on the Twilight Princess game. So far, at the point of this recording, the collection is incomplete. She is still drawing, writing, publishing the end books of the Zelda publication, but I think she has done an amazing job in putting a storyline and giving a bit more structure to the game, because basically the game as a gameplay makes total sense, but actually portraying that onto into book form, she had to give it a bit more substance in certain areas and explain certain things that might have not been touched on as much in the game. I am a big fan of it. It is awesome. And if you have not checked it out, definitely do. Yeah.
Strong recommendation.
Well, the manga adaptation began almost 10 years after the initial release of the game on which it was based. It launched only a month before the release of the high-definition remake. And as of May 2016, the English localization by Viz Media is being produced for release in the West. Of course, now they've made it. It's awesome. To commemorate the launch of My Nintendo Loyalty Program in March 2016, Nintendo released My Nintendo Pre-Cross, The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, a pre-cross puzzle game developed by Jupiter for the download of the Nintendo 3DS. So there's been lots of games made for the Twilight Princess, because of course the other big side game that you can play is the Crossbow Training, which I haven't, but I've heard good or interesting reviews from it.
I've played it like once.
What did you think?
It was like very arcadey, really. Like, you know those ones where you, like at the arcade where it's got like the gun set up and you're just like going through the different rooms just trying to shoot the targets. It's very much like that, using like the crossbow thing for the Wiimote. It was fun. It was fine.
Because of course the other adaptation, so you've had the P-Cross puzzle game, the Crossbow Training, and also Hyrule Warriors.
Yes. Yeah.
Which was a big game made with, of course, characters from all the Zelda games, including Midna in both her Imp form and her Twilight forms, Zant, and the NPC character Agatha. Bug Lady.
Yeah.
Bug Lady.
Yeah.
It wasn't butterflies. Bugs. Definitely bugs.
Yeah.
As playable warriors in the Zelda crossover title Hyrule Warriors, and its various side ones. Of course, there's been Hyrule Warriors, and then there's been Hyrule Warriors
Definitive, wasn't it?
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's been pretty good for the Zelda Twilight series to have those mini games. Well, mini games for it. Of course, some of the Twilight properties have also been seen in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, and including models of Link, Zelda, Ganondorf, the Bridge of Eden stage, Elden stage, music, trophies, and stickers. And this, of course, has happened with Super Smash Bros. For the Nintendo 3DS and the Wii U, and of course now the Super Smash Bros. Ultimate one for the Switch.
Yeah. Although I don't think any of the characters use their Twilight Princess designs anymore.
Oh, is it all Breath of the Wild now?
Obviously, young Link is like Ocarina of Time design.
Yeah.
Link is Breath of the Wild design. Zelda is A Link Between Worlds design. Ganondorf is Ocarina of Time design. Sheik is like a kind of mix. It's like a slightly more colourful version of the Ocarina of Time design.
You still get Midna as an assist trophy though, because that was in the Super Smash Brothers Ball version. So of course that would be in the Ultimate version as well. I know we've been talking a lot about Breath of the Wild and links between Twilight and the Twilight game and Breath of the Wild, but of course, as you mentioned earlier, there was a middle game in between those two, Skyward Sword. There was noticeably some borrows from Twilight Princess into Skyward Sword, including Link's general design, many of his animations, and the sound and movements of certain enemies, such as the Deku Babas.
Yeah.
Certain those planty creatures. Another game also borrowed several elements in the Twilight game, also borrowed by the Spirits Tract, including the collection of Tears of Lights, the letters from the postman being retrained, Princess Zelda being susceptible to a villain possession, and the presence of the Bubblins and the Bulbos within the overworld. So a lot of post-Twilight games have taken inspiration from the Twilight game, which is awesome, really, if you think about it.
Yeah.
So, how many did it sell? Well, Twilight Princess sold 8.85 million copies worldwide. In fact, it was the best-selling Zelda game, obviously, before Breath of the Wild came out. Breath of the Wild took a lot of the titles from Twilight Princess, but I thought that was pretty impressive if you think about, like, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask. There's quite a few really good, Wind Waker, really good Zelda games out there that Twilight Princess had that title to begin with.
Yeah, well, I think it was just that specific targeting of the Western markets, wasn't it? Really going for something that, like, was really, like, the in thing, because Nintendo does have a certain habit of just doing what they want, and it kind of works out for them in the end, rather than anything else. But they were specifically kind of targeting that demographic, so I'm not surprised.
I'm surprised to a little bit of a degree, because of course quite a few games came out with the whole like transform into werewolf thing, and most of them were seen as kind of like silly add-ons, whereas this took it, really rolled with it, and even improved on it. So as you said, Nintendo does seem to sometimes just think, let's go, let's do this, and really just commit to whatever little new transformation or song or anecdote they're pushing this Zelda time. I was still really impressed.
Yeah, I think it's because they kind of bake whatever the big mechanic is, they kind of bake it into the story, so it doesn't feel like a gimmick as much. I mean, sometimes it is just a gimmick.
Sometimes.
But, like, this is a series that was kind of known for it, because you had, like, the moving back and forward in time, you had the light world, dark world stuff, A Link to the Past, you had the 3-day cycle, and then you had, like, the big ocean. So this was, like, they're used to the Zelda games always having these, like, different things.
And I suppose it's not the first time from those examples that they have a dark side to the Zelda world. Like, as you said, that you've got Hyrule and Dark Hyrule. There's always been like this sort of flip of the coin where for everything that's light, there is a dark. So yeah. I suppose it made most sense to do that. I just suppose taking the wolf form, I mean, werewolves, whatnot, it was a bit more predictable, but Zelda way of doing things, they just made it their own.
Yeah, and it's a bit more like natural for a franchise like Zelda than just to pick an example from that era. Sonic.
I'm not going to lie, Sonic Unleashed was going through my mind when I was making those examples.
Because you've played it, haven't you? A little bit.
I have, a little bit. I had the game. I never completed it, and it was very much daytime, I'm walking around as Sonic, and then nighttime, you're a beast. It was not very fluent in my mind, and it was very gimmicky, whereas Twilight Princess, in comparison, I mean, to travel through the worlds, the fact that certain areas were blocked off by Twilight, and the whole struggle between him as a wolf when he first gets transformed, whether he'd even go back to a human, and then of course once they get that piece of dark material, being able to transform whenever he wants. I don't know, it just flowed a bit more. But maybe that's because I'm more of a Zelda Nintendo fan than a Sonic.
Yeah, if you can believe that, this being our third Zelda episode on this show.
So, I have enjoyed immensely talking about an amazing Twilight Princess game when she gets a title.
What's your final verdict on it?
As a general game, very enjoyable. Definitely check it out. It is a good gameplay. I, of course, know more of the Wii version than the Gamecube version, but from my research, they're basically the same game. It's just be slightly different. If you have played the Wii version, it will be mirrored in the GameCube version. Also, of course, the HD version seems to have sorted out any nooks and crannies and problems that they had with the original Wii version due to the rush of having the two versions be released. So it does sound like that the HD version would be the ultimate way of playing this game without all the nooks and crannies and everything ironed over. As a Zelda game, I say it's probably quite high on my list. I mean, it's very hard to compare something like Breath of the Wild to a Twilight Princess game, because Twilight Princess, quite a lot with the other Zelda games, followed the linear track. So I think it's very hard to judge an open world game to a game that is very much a linear sort of storyline, because there's certain things that you can do in each that you can't do in the other. It's very hard comparing the two, when one you can literally go off and do whatever the fuck you want, and the other one you have to be like A, B, C, D. Compared to a similar game who's very linear, like Ocarina of Time, more than Majora's Mask, because Majora's Mask had that whole time element to it.
Yeah.
I'd say that I enjoy it just as much. Like, Ocarina of Time probably still beat it in a vote, but only because Ocarina of Time has certain... It was kind of the first game to do certain things in certain genres, and regardless how well other Zelda games follow, they'll still feel like, they'll still be compared. But I think Twilight Princess should be based on its own gameplay, on its own merit, because it is a very enjoyable game. And as we've said, certain story plot lines throughout this video, I just think it keeps you on your toes and opens a nice bit of the world of Zelda. Although, to be fair, I've been happy of a Wind Waker 2 as well, so I wasn't exactly going to lose out in this, really. I liked Toon Link. I thought he was cute. How about you? What do you think?
I think I pretty much agree. Although I think Twilight Princess is one of those games where, when I think back to it, I have very fond memories. One of the things that we haven't mentioned is the hidden village bit.
Ah, yes.
Where basically you get to just snipe an entire village of enemies with your bow and arrow, which was cool.
Very fun. And sneak around, if they'd had more of those, that would have been a lot more, if you originally get into a Hyrule Castle by doing that, that would have been a lot of fun. Yeah,
I think it's one of those games that is a classic. Like I said, I've done probably still up somewhere as an 80-part, YouTube Let's Play I did of it years ago. But then when it comes to comparing it to the other Zelda games, I think if you're do you want to start replaying a Zelda game tomorrow? I'd be like, yes. And if you said which one, I'd probably be like, Ocarina of Time. Okay, you can't do Ocarina of Time. Okay then, Breath of the Wild. You can't do Breath of the Wild. Wind Waker, no. Majora's Mask, no. It'd probably be quite far down on my list of games that I would just sit down and replay tomorrow. And I think a lot of that, and it's kind of been something that I've noticed with watching this YouTuber, I should shout him out really, I've mentioned it before, is Attacking Toucans. And watching him do it, I'm like, oh yeah, I really like that bit. Oh yeah, that music's really good. Oh yeah, that temple design's really fun. But then but then there's the bits between the temples, which sometimes just drag for ages.
For example, the opening bit. I didn't even remember all that stuff with the monkey in the jungle and all that kind of stuff. So, in the forest. But then again, you could say the same for Skyward Sword when you're trying to find your bird. But I suppose that bit was still, trying to find your bird was still shorter than the entirety of the Twilight Princess intro bit. And you had to learn the skills of flying.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's a bit... So I made a point, and then immediately told myself why I was wrong. So
You're just arguing with yourself. You don't need another host. Just
I always need another host.
So yeah, like, it's one of those things where, don't get me wrong, it is like up there. It's like a great game. But if you ask me to compare it to other Zelda games, I kind of go, I don't know. I think I'd rather replay these ones for these reasons.
Yeah, no, I can definitely feel that. So it's definitely a hard one. It's not a top Zelda, but it's definitely a top game.
Yeah.
And it's not a bad game. It's not a bad Zelda game. It's just there's so many good Zelda games. It's a hard act to follow.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's like when we compare some games, we're like, they're both great. It's just the difference between giving it like an 8.5 for Twilight Princess compared to like a 9 for Wind Waker or something like that. You know, you're up in the higher chambers of scores.
You're getting really anal right now. Really like Pacific sort of. It's really that sort of close.
Yeah, you're still going to have fun.
Yeah. And that's all we can really say about this game. You're still going to have fun.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed talking about it. I really enjoy this game. And I hope you've enjoyed listening.
Yeah, no, thank you for joining us for Big Nostalgia. This is the first of 16 new episodes coming to you this year, all on GameCube and Wii games. We'll be back next week where the games we'll be covering... Actually, it's more than 16 games, because next week it's a double bill. It's a double header of Wii Sports and Wii Play. Will we enjoy talking about it? That was a pun of some kind. And I'm gonna end the episode there.
I've been Vicky.
I've been Phil. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Catch us again next week.
Yeah, and let us know in the comments what you think of Twilight Princess and what your favourite bits are.
And where it kind of lists on your whole Zelda game ranking, yeah.
But until then, yeah, we'll see you next time.
Take care. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Attention!